The rain hammered against the windshield like bullets from heaven, each drop exploding into 1,000 fragments before sliding down into darkness. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white against the black leather, as he pulled into the driveway of what used to be home. He sat there for a moment, engine running, watching the warm yellow light spill from the kitchen window. Through the rain-streaked glass, he could see Sarah moving around inside, probably making dinner for the kids. Emma would be doing homework at the kitchen table, her tongue poking out slightly when she concentrated, just like her mother. And little Jake would be building something elaborate with his blocks, creating worlds that only made sense to a 5-year-old mind. This was it, the moment he'd been dreading for weeks. The moment that would change everything forever. Marcus turned off the engine, and the silence felt deafening. Even the rain seemed to quiet down, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. He reached into his jacket pocket and felt the envelope there, crisp and final. The divorce papers Sarah had been waiting for him to sign. The custody agreement that would turn him from a father into a weekend visitor. The legal documents that would transform his family into a broken thing, scattered across 2 different addresses. He'd been driving around for hours trying to find the courage to walk through that front door. He'd stopped at 3 different bars, ordered drinks he never touched, and sat staring at his reflection in mirrors that showed him a man he barely recognized anymore. When had he become this person? When had he started choosing work over bedtime stories? When had he stopped seeing the way Sarah's eyes lit up when he walked into a room? The affair had lasted 6 months. 6 months of lies and hotel rooms and text messages deleted before he got home. 6 months of telling himself it didn't mean anything, that it was just stress relief, that Sarah would never find out. But secrets have a way of growing in the dark, feeding on guilt until they become too big to hide. Sarah had found out 3 weeks ago, not through some dramatic confrontation or private investigator, but through something as simple as a credit card statement. A charge for flowers he'd never brought home, a restaurant reservation for 2 on a night he'd claimed to be working late. The kind of stupid, careless mistake that unravels everything. The conversation that followed was the worst hour of his life. She hadn't screamed or thrown things or demanded explanations. She'd just sat at their kitchen table, the same table where they'd planned their wedding, where they'd fed their babies their first solid food, where they'd helped Emma with her math homework just last week. She'd sat there with tears streaming down her face and asked him one simple question. Why? He couldn't answer her then, and he couldn't answer her now. There was no good reason, no excuse that would make sense to anyone, least of all himself. He'd had everything a man could want, and he'd thrown it away for something that felt exciting in the moment, but meant absolutely nothing in the long run. Marcus looked at the house again. His house. Their house. Soon to be her house. The place where his children would grow up without him tucked in every night. Where Sarah would eventually learn to be happy again, probably with someone who deserved her in ways he never had. He pulled out his phone and started typing a text message to Sarah. "I'm outside, I have the papers." Then he deleted it and tried again. "Can we talk one more time?" Delete. "I'm sorry" seemed too small for the magnitude of what he'd destroyed. "I love you" felt like a lie after what he'd done. Finally, he just typed, "I'm here," but he couldn't send it. His thumb hovered over the screen for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Through the window, he saw Emma look up from her homework and say something to her mother. Sarah laughed, and the sound carried through the rain and the glass and hit him like a physical blow. When was the last time he'd made her laugh like that? The front door opened, and Sarah stepped onto the porch. She wasn't wearing a coat, just the blue sweater he'd bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. She stood there, looking at his car, and even from this distance he could see the exhaustion in her shoulders, the way she held herself like someone carrying a weight too heavy to bear. She raised her hand in a small wave, not friendly, not angry, just acknowledging his presence, waiting for him to do what he'd come here to do. Marcus reached for the door handle, then stopped. Once he walked up that path, once he handed over those papers, it would be real. Final. There would be no more pretending that this was just a rough patch they could work through. No more hoping that somehow, some way, he could undo the damage he'd caused. He thought about Emma's last school play, where she'd been a tree in the forest scene. She'd stood so still and proud, her arms stretched out like branches, and when the curtain fell, she'd searched the audience until she found his face. The smile she'd given him then could have powered the whole theater. Would she still smile at him like that when he was just the guy who picked her up every other weekend? And Jake, who still believed his daddy could fix anything that was broken, who brought him every toy that stopped working, every book with a torn page, every small disaster that seemed enormous in a 5-year-old world. How do you explain to a child that some things, once broken, can never be put back together? The rain was getting heavier now, drumming against the roof of the car like an impatient crowd. Sarah was still standing on the porch, getting soaked, waiting for him to make a decision. She could see her shivering, but she didn't go back inside. She was giving him this moment, this last chance to be the man she had married instead of the stranger he'd become. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to imagine walking up that path, tried to picture himself sitting at the kitchen table one more time, signing papers while his children played in the next room, unaware that their world was about to split in half. He tried to imagine the conversation they'd have to have with Emma and Jake, the careful words they'd use to explain why Daddy wouldn't be living here anymore. But when he opened his eyes, he couldn't do it. Not tonight. Not like this, with the rain and the darkness and the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them like a curtain he couldn't pull back. He started the car. Sarah's face changed when she heard the engine turn over. The resignation in her expression shifted to something else, something that might have been relief or might have been disappointment. She took a step forward, then stopped, understanding what he was telling her without words. Marcus put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway slowly, giving her time to go back inside, giving himself time to change his mind. But she stayed on the porch, watching him leave, and he stayed in the car, choosing the coward's path one more time. As he drove away, he caught one last glimpse of the kitchen window in his rearview mirror. Emma was standing there now, her small face pressed against the glass, watching her father disappear into the night. She raised her hand in a wave just like her mother had, and Marcus felt something break inside his chest that he knew would never heal. He drove for hours that night, through empty streets and past closed shops, past the park where he'd taught Emma to ride her bike, and the ice cream place where Jake always ordered chocolate with rainbow sprinkles. He drove past the church where he and Sarah had gotten married, past the hospital where both his children had been born, past all the landmarks of a life he was walking away from. When morning came, he was 3 states away, sitting in a diner parking lot with divorce papers still unsigned in his jacket pocket. He'd left everything behind, the good and the bad, the love and the guilt, the family he'd destroyed and the chance to help put it back together. He never went back, never signed the papers, never called, never sent a birthday card or Christmas present. He became a ghost in his own story, a man who'd had everything and chose nothing instead. Years later, he would sometimes wonder what happened to them, whether Emma still did that thing with her tongue when she concentrated, whether Jake ever became the engineer he dreamed of being, whether Sarah found someone who loved her the way she deserved to be loved. But he never tried to find out. Because some doors, once you walk away from them, can never be opened again.
And some choices, once made in the darkness of a rainy night, echo through every day that follows, a reminder of the man you were and the man you chose not to become. The rain had stopped by the time he drove away that night, but for Marcus, it never really ended. It followed him wherever he went, a storm of his own making, washing away everything he'd ever cared about and leaving him with nothing but the memory of a yellow light in a kitchen window and the faces of the people he'd loved enough to destroy.